conventional nursing for many years, and then the last 12 years I transitioned over to holistic and more functional alternative nursing. Um, and then the last 2.5 years, I opened my own shop. My goal is to kind of help people navigate a more natural, approach to healthcare and to their body. So many people believe, so many years ago, used to be you had the town doctor who knew everyone, and he knew your parents and your grandparents and your neighbors, and he knew everything about you and was able to take care of you and your whole family. And we've gotten away from that. And I've just felt like for the last few years, that's sort of one of the best things for us to get back to in small communities is get back to those people that know everyone. And part of me getting to where I'm at was many years, or not many years, about 8, 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune illness and told by the time I was 50, I would be in a wheelchair and probably using oxygen because I was really struggling physically. And, when you're in your early 40s, that doesn't sound like a really good middle age. So, um, I applied everything that I sell, that I talk about, that I educate people on. I applied all of that to my own life, and I've yet to take the first medication. I'm now 51. I'm doing much better than I was at 38, 39, health-wise. No wheelchair, no oxygen. I'm doing really well. And other people can do that. And so my goal is to make it accessible to people, help them navigate that because it can be a little scary and overwhelming in the beginning. And I opened a small tea shop and apothecary up in Chillicothe, Ohio. And you can find me there in the downtown area, or you can find me online at teaoflifeapothecary.com. And I'm sorry I took the long way around that, but that's who I am and where I'm at.
Perfect. And just so you know, Angel, they're here for you. They're not here to listen to me talk, right? So it's all about you. So why nursing? How did you get involved in the nursing field?
Well, I started out as a nurse's aide. That was in my last year of high school. I went to the vocational school. I did, a year of getting my nurse's aide training, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with I was that person when I went to work. I worked at a nursing home, and my job or my goal every day was to learn something from these people. They had lived a lifetime already, and I felt like if I could learn something every day, I would be ahead of the curve. I could avoid certain mistakes or maybe minimize certain mistakes. And what I found was overwhelmingly when I would ask people, what are some of your biggest regrets? What are some things that you wish you would have done more? Um, it was never work. It was never have cars or money, or I mean, you would think maybe that's what people would have said, but it wasn't. It was always, I wish I would have spent more time with my family. I wish I would have traveled more. Many people wish they would have done more in their church. They would have been more active in their church. And so that was something that I realized then that, being a nurse's aide was going to be a good job for me, but to really care for these people, I had to step it up. So I went and got my LPN, and I moved into the next level and started, doing that. And then I had children, so I had to get out of the weekly, shift work. And I went to work in many doctors' offices through the years, trying to find something that resonated and fit my lifestyle. And I floated around. I've worked internal medicine, private practice. I've worked psychiatry. I've worked OB-GYN. I've worked for surgeons. I've done it all. And like I said, about 10 to 12 years ago, I landed in the holistic realm, and I just knew that's where I was supposed to be. That's when nursing started making sense to me. And my goal is just, it's always been to help people. I, I just love to see people thrive. And so nursing just seems to fit that so well.
I have a lot of respect for nurses because the job isn't easy, especially anyone that is able to take care of others, because you've mentioned some of the challenges you've had. You've probably seen so many people struggle with their own health. And one thing I always found interesting, and I share this, is your body will whisper when something is wrong. And then when it starts
It
to
will.
build up inside of you, it will yell, "Pay attention to me." But when it usually gets to that point, unfortunately, it's something that's really bad, really severe, really chronic. Or maybe you've seen this where sometimes they just can't come back from maybe what they're struggling with. Do you find that some people ignore what their body is begging them to hear?
I believe we've been trained to do that. We have become trained to ignore and to treat symptoms. Instead of listening to them, it is, oh, they have this symptom, here's this medication or treatment. They have this symptom, here's this medication or treatment. Um, many, many years ago, if you had something going on, I mean, I know for my grandparents, if you had an upset stomach, the first thing my great grandmother would say, what are you worrying about? What are you upset about? People don't really ask those things anymore. If you have an upset stomach, oh, here's some Pepsid. Oh, here's a Zantac. They don't ask you what you're upset about. And that truly does play a lot into it. So I believe that we have sort of been conditioned to ignore those symptoms. And I feel like in many ways we've begun to see them as the enemy and not what they were intended for. They were intended, like you said, to say, hey, something's out of balance. Hey, this requires attention. We've stopped looking at it like that, and we see it more as kill the messenger, unfortunately. Silence them at least.
Do you then see sometimes that maybe it's some people don't want to be vulnerable because to come and say that my body needs attention could be a sign of weakness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know for a lot of people my age and older, you were basically just taught to push through, just keep going, push through it. And that in itself has contributed, I believe, to a lot of, problems that people struggle with. Just keep pushing, just keep pushing, just keep pushing, and kind of ignore those symptoms. And there's a joke about going mom deaf to the kid that keeps saying mom, 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 mom. But we become body deaf to our body when something continually keeps trying to get our attention. And so, yes, that's a huge problem is that, no longer listening to those things.
I've noticed a number of women, because that's who I primarily work with when it comes to coaching, as they've gotten older and when they want to ignore something, either, and we talked about this, right? The four pillars, either it's physical health, spiritual health, emotional health, or mental health. What they do is they drown themselves in work. Let me go work 10 hours.
Mhm.
Let me go work 12, 14, 16, 18. Why do you think some people would rather be distracted than maybe pay attention to some of the health concerns, either emotionally, spiritually, physically, or mentally, when it comes to their own bodies?
Well, some people have never been taught how to handle that. And I say that with love. A lot of it's the element that I work in, there's no blame to be laid. There's no judgment of parents or anything like that. But if a parent was raised in an environment where they weren't allowed to express themselves or they weren't taught how to regulate emotions, then they can't teach that to their children. So a lot of people that are struggling, they may have had parents who were never given those skills, so they were not given the skills. And as we get older, it can be difficult to have to deal with some things, having to deal with internal shame or internal guilt or things that have laid under the surface for many years. And it can seem overwhelming. It can seem very it can put a lot of people into freeze mode. So what better way to avoid it than to stay so busy that you don't have time for it?
Yeah, that's tough. I couldn't imagine, because in my 20s, and maybe you're this way, Angel, we're invincible, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can dodge bullets. knees. We could, jump out of bed without having bad knees and bad back. We could do
Yes.
all of these things. And what's something that you noticed that was the biggest change in your life where you're like, aha, I gotta move differently?
Right before I was diagnosed, I would come home. I had a 2 hour commute one way. And so I would get home from work after working all day. And the last probably 2 miles of the drive, I was already starting to dread walking in the house because I knew getting up out of the car and moving into the house, I would almost be in tears. And I remember thinking, I'm in my early 40s. What's it going to be like when I'm in my 80s? And it was like that was sort of I knew before I ever even went to the doctor, I knew that changes were coming. I just didn't know what changes they were going to be, but I knew something had to change because my body had just gotten to the point it just could not continue the path I was on.
How scary was that for you to realize here you are approaching midlife? And I say that with love,
Mhm.
right? And you're like, wow, what is life going to be 10 years, 20 years, 15 years from now?
It was terrifying. It really was. And then when you finally go sit in front of your doctor and they are looking at the same labs you're looking at and they're telling you that, yeah, there's really not much you can do. Autoimmune, there's really just not much you can do for that. And my brain said, that's not true. That was my brain. That's not true. And I told my doctor, I'm not going to take medication. Give me 3 months. If I can't make changes in 3 months that have an impact on me, I will come back. I will take the medicine. I'll do whatever you say. But give me 3 months to prove to myself, because I have to prove to myself that I cannot do it first. And I mean, I did a complete overhaul. So it wasn't just changing what I ate, changing what I drank. It was a complete overhaul. It was it was a complete negativity purge. So I changed what was on my social media. I changed the movies and the TV shows that I watched. I changed the music that I listened to. My goal was if it created this, oh my gosh, response, it had to go. It had to go because you cannot heal in a negative environment. And as I started changing those things, along with the food, the things that I drank, taking the right supplements, just those subtle little changes, I started noticing I was feeling better. Then as I implemented more and more and more, it literally becomes addictive because you start not only seeing it, but you're feeling it. Other people are noticing it, and it's like this is real. There's something to this. And I literally went to the deep end and just jumped in head first, and I've yet to look back. So,
That is such a courageous story because one, not a lot of people can turn off the TV. Let's be honest, right? And not a lot of people can maybe remove people from their lives or maybe remove themselves from environments that are no longer serving them. Where did you find the courage to say, today is the day? Anything that isn't serving me, anything that is negative, anything that makes me feel unwell, I'm no longer going to be a part of it.
um, I'll try not to get very emotional. My biggest motivation was my children. My children. You know, the minute we know we're going to be parents, and then they lay that baby in our arms, we say, I would do anything for this child. I would do anything. But would we really do anything? Would we do the hard things? Would we do the inner work? Would we learn to change our coping mechanisms? Would we learn to eat better? Would we learn to deal with the past traumas and hurts? Would we dig in deep? I mean, yes, we would sacrifice. We would go to war for him if we had to. We would do all of these things, but would we do the deeper work? And sitting in that chair, I realized very quickly I would do the deeper work because I had a car accident several years ago, and the good Lord allowed me to survive that. And the only thing that during that car accident, the only thing on my mind was God gave me two children, and He didn't give them to anyone else to raise. He gave them to me. And so I've got to be here to raise these children. Well, fast forward, now I've got this diagnosis, and it's like, okay, well, next level of the game, I have to step up even more because, I have to be able to show them the path so that they can avoid having health issues down the road. And my kids were my biggest motivator. They still are. And now it's become all of the people that I work with because as I see them healing and them improving, it's like this is awesome. This is so awesome to see this movement happening and people not just getting their lives back, but having an amazing quality of life as they move through their lives and their years with their family.
If your children are watching, what would you want to tell them in regards to how much of an inspiration and impact they have on your life to be the woman that you are right now?
So I have two biological, and then my nephew is my third kid. So basically, I have three children. Um, my kids have been the biggest motivating factor, and they have provided me with a desire to learn myself better so that I could turn around then and be better for them and be better with them. We're supposed to raise our children and teach them, but in many ways, my kids have taught me many things, not only about being a mother, but about myself. And without my children, I would not be the person I am today. My children have been the biggest impact on my life.
There's so many people that they pull inspiration or motivation from different sources, and children are such a blessing because you get to see these human beings form into beautiful adults in many cases, but sometimes we forget how, as we're teaching them to grow, they're teaching us to grow as well. You mentioned some of the people that you work with. When you're speaking to them, when they're sharing their stories, how much of yourself do you see in them?
In the beginning, 99% of the people I work with, I see them starting where I was at. And so anytime somebody comes in to work with me, I typically I ask a few questions, but the first question that I ask is always going to tell me where they're at and how they're going to respond to the path that they're on. And the question is always on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is the worst, 10 is the best. How much do you truly love yourself? How much do you love yourself in comparison to your spouse, to your children, to your parents, to your coworkers, to your best friend? How much do you love yourself? And majority of people, when I start with them, they'll say, about a 4 or 5. Okay. So we start there. So do you do things for others out of obligation? Oh, absolutely. Well, you lose a point. Do you do when you don't have it in you, when you are just completely wiped out, but you still pick up and go for others? Oh, yes. Well, you lose a point. And we go through this whole questionnaire, and what we find is 99% of the people that I work with, they tend to start their self-love at about a 1 or a 2. Now, when you love yourself at a 1 or a 2, you are not taking care of yourself. No matter how much you think that you're not. And there's so many studies, but there are multiple studies of two women, very same backgrounds, same age, same demographics, same everything, both stage 4 breast cancer. One lives, one dies. What was the deciding factor? And many of the studies that they've done, they find that the person who survives is fights as hard for themselves as they would have if this would have been their spouse going through treatment or their child or their parent. They advocate for themselves just like they would that person. They take rest for themselves just like they would encourage, this person to rest. They set boundaries. They don't go when they don't have that extra energy. And this isn't a puffed up self love. This isn't a self-conceit or anything like that, but this is strictly the, the Bible says we are to love others as ourself. God does not tell us to love our others more or less, but equal, because in his eyes, we are all equal. He doesn't look at you and say, okay, well, now your mom's more important and your wife and your children. No, he sees all of them equal across the board. They're his children. He loves each one of them individually equally. We're the ones who put a different level of love to each person in our life sometimes. And we always tend to put ourselves last. And whenever you're dealing with someone who has a low self-love, it is almost always an indicator that they are going to have chronic health issues at some point in their life.
So it's like saying that those who are looking for self-love, who have a one, it's because their self-love starts not only at a one, but after they've poured into everyone else's cup.
Correct.
And then that would lead to possibly people pleasing and them
Hmm.
taking on things that are not only taking their time, energy, and resources, but in a lot of ways are contributing to their sickness.
Hmm. And I usually ask these people, when you are feeling tired, when you are feeling wore out, and someone asks something of you, are you willing to give away your health to do that? A lot of these people that I work with, their children are grown and take advantage. Their siblings are grown and take advantage. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a spouse. And I don't advocate, I am not a person who advocates shutting anyone out of your life. I don't believe that's an answer. I don't believe that is healing. I don't believe that is a good remedy. I believe that those people are just as hurt and in many ways broken as myself. And so when I work with someone, I always encourage them to understand that you are a broken person working with a broken person. And it's important to realize that they're starting at a place as well, but you do have to set boundaries. You truly have to set boundaries, because what you're doing is you are trading off your health to help someone else. And in some cases, maybe you have a sibling who just always gets into trouble, always finds a way to get into trouble, and then they come to you to bail them out. And you wear yourself out trying to bail them out. Well, they've learned, I have a problem. I go to my sister, she's going to fix it. Life's good. There's no accountability, no responsibility. It's just, I made the mess. This person's going to fix it. And this person wears themselves out fixing it. When in fact, the true help would be to say, I'm here to love you and support you, but you made the mess. You must fix it and learn the lessons from it. And I'm here to help you. I will listen to you. I will be there for you. I will support you, but I'm no longer fixing. And it's really hard for many people to step out of the fixer role and become the supporter role.
I love that. It's hard for people to come out of fixer role and be in the supporter role. What do you then think are maybe some of the obstacles that people face when they want to stop fixing everything from everyone else and focus on fixing themselves first?
Well, a lot of times people are very hypervigilant. We live in a fast-paced world. We are constantly, our phones are going off, our computers are, just we have electronics going. People sometimes have TVs running in the background. There's always something, and it keeps our nervous system in a state of hypervigilance. So if you are somebody who grew up in a home where hypervigilance was important, so that you could tell if mom or dad was just not okay, or maybe grandma or grandpa, or whatever it may be, If you grew up in a home where hypervigilance was important for your survival, you became very attuned to that. And then as we get older, we still are very hyper vigilant and we're constantly paying attention to everyone around us. And a lot of times we pick up on the slightest disturbance in our area, maybe at work, maybe at home, maybe, with a coworker or a best friend in our church groups. We can, the minute they come in a room, we just pick it up instantly. Oh, so and so isn't doing good today. So and so's not okay today. Well, we keep focusing on them not being okay. And we want to fix that, not realizing that we think we're being helpful. We're caretakers, right? But what we don't realize is by fixing that, we make them not feel that way anymore. They feel better. We don't feel that disruptance, so we feel better. Not realizing sometimes that fixer role is self-serving. And that's really hard for some people to hear because a lot of times they've never even realized that. I know for myself, the first time I heard that, I'm like, are you kidding? I don't think so. Y'all need to be quiet. And then as I got to really learning, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. My hypervigilance makes me aware of very subtle changes. Therefore, I want to fix the problem so the problem goes away so I don't feel the problem. So that's one of the reasons that people struggle. Um, Also, some some people grow up in an environment where love is not unconditional. It's conditional on many things, and they are conditioned to do for others to receive love. So there's like so many factors, and that tends to work really bad for women because maybe dad wasn't the most emotional person. That doesn't mean he didn't love you. He just couldn't show you. Maybe because he wasn't taught how to show love. And so women tend to grow up trying to find that love, and they end up with a mate that is not optimal for them, that doesn't meet their needs. And so again, they stay in that role trying to be that fixer because that's what they're used to. So sometimes it's having to relearn and reset a whole mindset and get out of that fixing mindset and more into a observing mindset. And it's so easy to sit here and say, but when you put it into action, it is not an overnight gig. It takes a long time and it takes a lot of consistency and the willingness to want to change that.
I will absolutely agree. I was like that in my younger years where I would put everyone above myself, and there's times where I struggled with it. And Angel, I look at myself like, Train, why did you agree to do this? It's causing you stress. You feel warm in your chest. You're annoyed by it. And right, like it becomes an annoyance because you know you shouldn't be doing it, but you still do it. And then when it goes upside down, maybe, or when it drains you, there's really no one to blame but yourself. I had this conversation recently because I did the work to resolve that, and someone wanted me to do something which I really didn't want to do. And I just asked them, half jokingly but half seriously, and I was like, what's in it for me? What's the incentive to me, right? Person's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you're asking me to do something for you, which you wouldn't do for me. We can agree, right? And the person's like, we can agree. Right? Your no answer is an agreement, right? So I was like, in business or in any other situation, you'd have to give someone an incentive because
Right.
both parties knows that you wouldn't do it for the other person, but you want them to do it for you. So we had that conversation and I didn't end up doing it, but I just wanted to point that out because sometimes you have to be that firm. But I know that maybe you went through this, Angel, but I know some people can look at it and be like, Terrain, Angel, I feel bad when I say no.
Mhm.
I feel guilty when I worry about myself and not other people. Did you experience guilt when you decided to focus on your health? And if so, how did you deal with that?
I did. And that is a very common thing that a lot of people will say. that worked great for you, but I can't do that. You don't realize my mother or my father, or I always hear that. My parents would be so ashamed of me. They would be so upset with me. Um, Again, there is never any blame or any judgment put on a parent. But sometimes growing up, expectations were put on people and behavior, the outcome was rewarded with what they perceived as love or acceptance. And so, again, a lot of times it's that mindset. People believe that through their actions, they can gain love and acceptance, and that they're doing the right things because this person feels loved. Um, Love can be many, many things, but I always go back to, I've had a lot, again, a lot of times when I work with people, we go through the five love languages. And if your parents were acts of service, love language people, but you are a physical touch language person, it's going to really mess with you. And again, no judgment. Parents were not bad. They're doing what they know. They're doing the best they can. But there will be conceptions on the child's part because parents are acts of service, love language. It's going to make it very, very difficult for them to connect sometimes and to feel loved if they are a physical touch person. Whereas a hug would make them feel loved, what they were conditioned to learn was acts of service brought about love. And so it will leave them feeling very empty and very, and I've had some people say, I feel dirty. I feel like I've done something very wrong if I don't take care of others. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong. I feel a lot of times that love language issue is very difficult for children, and I don't think it gets enough earplay. I really don't think that people discuss that enough with parents. Um, you know, if you are an acts of service parent and your child is constantly hugging on you and that seems weird to you, you're just not that lovey, touchy, huggy person, that is going to cause that child some issues down the road. And so I really feel like that's something that absolutely needs to be brought into the factors as well. And one thing I do with people, I always ask them again, I ask about the self-love, but one of my next questions is I need 3 words to describe your mother, 3 words to describe your father, and 3 words to describe yourself. And when they always want to start out with great words. And I'm like, no, I want the 3 words that came to you. And if they're tough words, or if you want to say, well, mom's rude, or mom's cold, or mom was a giver. I hear that all the time. Oh, my mom, she was the most amazing woman. She was such a giver. She would give everything. Okay, well, mom was a giver. Therefore, mom wore herself out. Chances are that's one of the things you learned was how important it was to give to everyone else. And then I will ask, so tell me about mom's health history. And then that's when you start seeing, oh, well, mom had chronic arthritis and mom had, irritable bowel and mom had dementia. And it's like, mom gave all of her health away. Mom was not a bad person. She was loved by everybody and she was kind and wonderful, but she didn't learn those boundaries. So she gave all of her health away. So it's very important to understand when you're working with someone what their perception of their parents is and what their perception of their self is. Because a lot of times when you ask for 3 for the parent mother, 3 for the father, 3 for themselves, the 3 for themselves is what they perceived that their parents thought of them, almost always.
Could then that mean that some people's perception of themselves, since it comes from others, their parents in this example, maybe their value and their self-worth will come from others, and this is why they're performing these acts even to their detriment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it can give you a good picture as to, you know, I love my father. Oh my gosh, my father is a great man. But my father is a very pessimistic person. Everything is a catastrophe. Um, so whenever whenever I initially get bad news, there's that initial part of my brain that wants to go, oh my heavens, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But then it's like, okay, wait a minute, you know. And so there is that element of when you are raised in an environment with people that have a certain reaction, you tend to take on that reaction. And then you see the world that way growing up. Growing up, I would tend to see the world in a very negative way. Again, that was something I had to reset and relearn. And suddenly the world was not this horrible, dark place, that I had always thought. It was a totally different perspective.
I'm glad that you shared that because I can see a lot of people getting stuck in the negative thoughts, in the negativity. And you know what? My life is so bad, but those people over there, their life is so good. So let me gravitate towards them. And they need me to do something, I'm going to do it because it gives me a purpose and it gives me time around people that are a little bit more positive, maybe even more successful, even more attractive, more money. And then you mentioned the love languages. If you're growing up and you've always been loved in a way that you didn't want to be loved, for example, right, acts of service, but you really wanted words of affirmation, right?
Absolutely.
Physical touch, but you really wanted quality time. So they would grow up now as adults going into the world and they're off balance. They've
Hmm.
received love from other people in the way that they wanted to show it, but they didn't ever receive it in the way that they wanted to. So now, as adults, they got to perform, right? You went from A pluses
Hmm.
and good at sports to, okay, I'm dating the wrong man. I'm dating the wrong woman. I'm always around the wrong people. I'm giving my money away that I'm working 8, 10, 12 hours and I'm being used. When you're helping people and you're trying to get them to overcome some of their past experiences, is that difficult for people to maybe understand that it's going to be hard, it's going to be lonely, but you can do it, but there's going to be bumps along the way?
Yes, it is. And that's something I do try to tell people in the beginning. A health journey can be a lonely path. When you love yourself at a level one, you allow behavior and you allow people to treat you at level one. When you start improving and you start learning to love yourself at a level three or a level four, you suddenly look at level one treatment and you're like, I don't think so. You're not going to treat me that way. But when you get up to seven, eight, nine level love, self-love, and you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? It becomes very easy to fall back a little bit and start beating yourself up for allowing that behavior. Because again, we live in such a negative driven environment at all times. Um, it's very hard for people to look at the positive. Yeah, I was there, but look where I'm at. Few people look at it that way. Most people look back and think, what was I thinking? I was such an idiot for letting people do that. And they start beating themselves up and they slide back a little bit because, negative self-love is very harsh. It's very harsh. It's name calling. It's mistreating yourself physically, mentally. It's all of those things. And so a lot of times it's important to explain to people in the beginning that as you move up that scale and you learn to love yourself at the level three, at the level four, some people are not going to come with you on that journey. They're just not because they want to still treat you like they did at level one. And suddenly you're like, no, that doesn't work for me. And well, they want to keep pushing it. And so they kind of tend to weed themselves out because then the next thing you hear is, oh, well, they think they're all that. Look at them over there, being all different. And it's not that you're better than them. It's just that you are setting new boundaries. You're not accepting level one treatment anymore because you no longer love yourself at a level one. And it can be very lonely because a lot of times people do find that their friend circle changes as they heal. Sometimes the people that you grew up with, your cousins, your neighbors, your social circle may begin to fall apart and to change because those people knew you at level one love and they were okay with you at level one love. But now that you're at level 4 or 5, they don't, yeah, they can't manipulate you, use you, like you said, or get out of you what they were getting before. You're starting to hold them a little bit accountable, and they don't like that. And a lot of times, those people will just quietly weed out and go find the next person to leech onto. And and it is sad because then you look back and sometimes you see people that you've been friends with for 20 or 30 years have slowly migrated away, but some people are only meant to be in our lives for a season. You know, we have some people that are meant to be there from birth to death. Some people are meant, they come along and they ride with us to the end, but some people are only seasonal people. And as much as we love them, we don't get angry, we don't get hurt, we don't get mad. We just realize that that season has come to a close. And, we can still see them out of Walmart and wave and say hi. But as far as allowing them to mistreat us anymore, that ends. And as that ends, again, as we're moving up that ladder and that self-love is improving, slowly our health starts improving.
One of my exes, she struggled with that. This was a number of years ago, and she began to realize that her peer group weren't the healthiest people for her. And the more she did the work, the more she began to realize, oh my God, did I just spend the last 5 years around this? Right? It's like a pig realizing they're in mud. It's like, oh, I've been in
Hmm.
filth my entire life. And then when my relationship with her ended, she dated someone else because we still kept in contact here and there. And that person made her continue to see some of the wrongs of the peer group.
Hmm.
The last time I spoke to her, Angel, she ultimately went back to the group and she couldn't unsee what she was seeing in them. But the problem was she started to get sick. Her feet started to tingle. Her arms started to go numb. She had all these health issues. And now she realized after all these years, after all these failed romantic relationships, that being around the negativity, being around the people pleasing, giving up relationships to go back to like a pig in filth caused her her health.
Hmm.
And now that same group that she sacrificed all this for, they can't get back the health for her.
No.
So, right? So when you hear stories like that, what are your thoughts on it? Because to me, even though we're not together, it's heartbreaking. But there's probably so many people out there that have sacrificed so much of themselves, including their health. And
Hmm.
now when they want to make that change because they're kind of forced into, they probably can't make the change that they could have made a number of years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe God gave us this amazing body, and I believe that it has the ability to heal and restore to some degree, depending on where you're at. Um, of course, we're not going to regrow an arm or a leg, but I do believe that, the liver regenerates, the lungs can heal. There's so many things that can be done. I don't believe that it is all medication. I don't believe that it is all health care or all mental health. I don't believe that, and when I say this, everybody's going to be like, no, that's not. I don't believe that prayers and affirmations make it all better. I believe it is a place that has to start in the heart. I know a lot of people who do prayers and affirmations and they're just chanting something over and over and over. There's no sincerity to it. There's no heartfelt. They're washing dishes and they're saying this over and over. It's almost like a by the way kind of thing. I believe when a person is wanting to heal, I believe that it has to be something that you really have a serious conversation with God about. And I believe if He so chooses that you are to be restored, I believe there's almost always a reason, a mission, a plan. And it's not just, oh, I got my health back. I'm going to go about my life and I'm going to be a wonderful person and I'm going to live happily ever after. You now have you have a job. You need to go out and you need to help other people find that same path. You need to, God was gracious with you and you need to go out and help others. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give your life over to a life of servitude, but I do believe that there is something and some way where you can give back. All have different talents. We all have different abilities. You know, it's funny. The reason I got my LPN was because I didn't want to go to the college and get my RN because you had to take public speaking. And what do? I speak to people every day, all day. I was terrified of that. And so, whenever I started finding that my health was improving and I was feeling that call to do something more, I told God, if this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm in. I'll do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So you're going to have to lay it out for me. But if you lay the path in front of me, I will walk it. Hopefully I'll be able to see a little bit of where I'm going so that I don't get lost, but you lay it out in front of me and I will do it. And I am now in an area I had no idea was coming, down the pike for me. But I really believe that because much of my health has been regained, that it is my job and my duty to help others along their journey. And I believe that when people are truly sincere, I believe that God will grant that. Sometimes that's not what your role is to be. And, I've had a lot of people say, well, I prayed and prayed and prayed and I never got healed. Well, here's the beautiful thing. You can go to heaven with cancer. You can go to heaven with a broken body. You can go to heaven if you're paraplegic, quadriplegic. You cannot go to heaven with a broken soul that never sought Jesus. You can't do it. So if you have a diseased soul, that's an important part. And I really feel that some people, and I'm not in any way implying that somebody isn't a good person or isn't, Christian or anything, but some people, they really want to start with that soul aspect because they're so accustomed to going back and they're so pulled into that mindset of, I just can't walk away from it. I don't know who I am without this environment. So that is a place where they're going to have to really do some soul searching between them and God to learn who they are outside of that, in my words, poisonous group, that poisonous environment that keeps draining them of their life.
You mentioned the health aspect and the peer groups as well as their environment. How can then someone stop listening to those influences and start listening to the voice within?
So a lot of times our voice within has been hijacked. And I say that from my own personal experience. Like I said, when I started my journey, I would have probably rated my self-love in the negative, truthfully. But since we can't go negative, I'm going to start with one. I was at a level one. Um, so when I started my journey, I had chronic joint pain. I would use my inhaler anywhere from 6 to 12 times a day. A day. I lived with my rescue inhaler in my hand or my pocket at all times. Um, I would get winded just walking to the grocery store. I couldn't walk for very long. I mean, I could walk around the store, but I've always had trouble with my lungs that I can remember. And whenever I started my journey and I did the self-love thing, then the next step is every morning you sit up on the side of the bed and you list 5 things you love about yourself. I couldn't come up with two, let alone five. And you go to the bathroom and you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, eye to eye, you want pupil to pupil contact. You don't want to look at the end of your nose or the top of your head or stare at your toothbrush. You are looking pupil to pupil with yourself in the mirror. And you say, I see you and I love you 10 to 12 times. I couldn't even say it once, let alone, several. And then was the self-talk. You want to talk to yourself as a 3 or a 5-year-old child. You want to speak comforting, compassionately, lovingly, not baby talk, but if a child dumps something, it's like, oh my goodness, let me help you. Let me clean that up. Oh no, don't cry. It's okay. We're very kind when we talk to a 3 or a 5-year-old child. When I would speak to myself, my internal dialogue, you freaking moron, you absolute idiot. You don't, the words I chose to use, you don't deserve the air you breathe. You don't deserve the air you breathe. And to say that now, I mean, it literally chokes me up. I would say that all day to myself. And here I am sucking on my inhaler, and it just, it never registered. I've always been that harsh on myself. I would be so mean, so hurtful, so hateful. So if you took a 3 or a 5-year-old kid and you yelled at them, you idiot, you moron. You don't deserve the air you breathe. That child would continually hunker down. It wouldn't thrive. It wouldn't love itself. It would not be optimal. It just would not be able to function well. So a body with a harsh mind can't thrive. And when I started my journey, I had to change all those things. And the hardest one was changing the way that I spoke to myself. But what I have found through the years as I have changed that internal dialogue, that internal voice, that listening to my needs has gotten louder. It's become more confident. It's become more vocal. Um, and there have been times that it's actually spoken back. I'll be like, I really don't want it. Like you were saying a minute ago, there's things people ask you to do. And there's been times where I've been asked to do something and I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I don't want to. And that voice will rise up and say, then we're not. This doesn't sit well with us. We're not doing it. If we can't be all in, we're not doing it because we're going to do it out of obligation, which is not going to fit well with our spirit. We're going to be doing it. We're going to, we're just going to, it's going to bother us the entire time. We're going to wish that we hadn't done it. We're going to dread it clear up till the moment that it's here. And that is no state to live in. And so, yes, that voice has become louder, but a lot of it changes as you learn to speak softer to yourself. To, you're allowing yourself to have a safe space to be able to speak up for your own self. Sometimes many of us were never given that or felt like we weren't given that. And so we're allowing that for the first time. And in the beginning, it's a quiet little voice, but then it does start getting louder and louder.
Yeah, just like how the body, when it gets sick, it starts to yell, the positivity and the good things start to yell too. You are important.
Hmm.
Giving yourself grace is so, so valuable. Angel, as we close, I want to ask you one final question, but I want to give you three wishes as I do it, okay?
Okay.
What are three things you wish people knew about taking themselves from level one to level two and so on when it comes to the love that they have for themselves?
Hmm. Almost everything that they believe about themselves is someone else's opinion, and none of it is the opinion that God has of them.